In the last 4 parts of the series, we've been building a timeline from Candace Owens' early emergence online to her rapid rise to the moment she became part of something much larger than herself. And with each step forward, the story didn't just expand. It became more complicated, more interconnected, and at times harder to separate what was being presented from what was actually there. But as we move into this next part of the timeline, the focus shifts once again, because this is where the story starts to move beyond just commentary, organizations, or even controversy, and into something else entirely. Not just in the way narratives are consumed, but in the way they're constructed. In this episode, we're going to look at a series of overlapping events, from international travel and media appearances to interviews, business ventures, and the people operating in the background. We're going to examine how connections are drawn, how patterns are interpreted, and how, in some cases, those interpretations can take on a life of their own. Because this is also the point in the timeline where something else becomes clear. Not just how narratives are built, but how they can be expanded, reframed, and at times weaponized. And when that happens, when speculation, influence, and audience trust all start intersecting with a conspiratorial mind, the lines between questioning and constructing a story becomes a lot harder to see. This is part 5. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome everybody who's new. The channel is growing. I've actually met a milestone, so thank you, everyone, for that. It's very exciting. I'm very happy about it. Okay, so we're continuing on with our Candace Owens timeline in this series. And I feel like this is going to be a very, very interesting show. Okay, so where we left off last time was we were talking about how she had got hired for Turning Point USA. And then later on, she got hired with PragerU. So that's where we were as far as her career was going. And while she was with PragerU, she still had Brexit, right? So that's where we're going to start. Okay, and I have some very interesting things to go over. Let me pull up our infographic that we had last time. Okay, so we're at the Turning Point USA. Then she started Brexit. Then we need to go into her starting her career at PragerU. And this is where things really start to get interesting as I was looking into this time period here. So let me go over some stuff with you. Candace Owens' blexit launch late 2018 and her PragerU years 2019 to 2021. It actually goes here. It should go to 2021. And then she starts in sometime in 2021 to the Daily Wire. And I want to focus really on some weird connections and some transatlantic right-wing cross-pollination that I find strange, and donor overlaps, personal pivots, and ironic overlaps that just seem kind of odd. The Brexit meets Blexit transatlantic romance pivot, December 2018, the exact crossover moment. Blexit officially launches October 2018, And Candace Owens used Kanye West to initially hype the merch, which brought in the urban pop culture element to her launch to get more eyes on it and everything. But then he, remember, awkwardly distanced himself from it the very next day. Owens was already at the time tpusa's communications director and urban engagement lead. 2 months later, December 11th through the 12th of 2018, she flies to London for the soft launch of Turning Point UK, the British clone of Charlie Kirk's tpusa. She gives a speech at the Royal Automobile Club. Okay, now remember in a previous video on this series, that was the speech. I played it in one of the other videos where she got the Hitler comments controversy going on. Let me show you that. Okay, so that speech that we watched where she made the Hitler comments where she was like, oh, Hitler, he was okay until he tried to go global, basically. That had a big backlash. That was this speech at the Automobile Club. And here is John Mappin. Okay, so let me continue. Just 2 months later, after she launched Brexit in December 11th through the 12th of 2018, she flies to London for the soft launch of Turning Point UK. She gives a speech at the Royal Automobile Club. That's where she first meets George Farmer, British aristocrat, son of Lord Michael Farmer. And George is also called Honorable. So his title is Honorable George Farmer. They always leave that out, but they say it at her wedding. If you listen closely, once they say their vows, the priest, he says the Honorable George Farmer and the Honorable Candace Farmer when he, introduces them after that. Hey guys, so it's that time where I need to ask you to subscribe to the channel. And if you're already subscribed, just hit the like, please. If you don't do this, I will be abducted by aliens. Thanks. They have dinner the next night. He proposes via FaceTime 18 days later. This is literally the moment that Brexit, UK right, collides with blexit, the US Black conservative exit. Farmer was a hardcore Brexit supporter. Owens was pushing her US version. Their whirlwind romance becomes the bridge between US MAGA and tpusa circles and UK Tory Brexit Reform UK networks. They even did joint events later at the 2019 Liberty University convocation where they explicitly discussed Brexit and Blexit side by side. The 18-day proposal that fused two exits. Okay, so think about this. Just think about the connections. George Farmer was very in with a lot of British politician networks, and he was also very much into the media side of things, the tech and the media and the finance. So he sees Candace Owens at this automobile club. Just look at this picture. This is where he says that there was something about her. She's not even dressed up all that nice. She makes controversial statements about Hitler. Her speech didn't even seem all that great. Now, remember that she told Charlie, so she explains in one of her many retellings about how she went to the UK, that she told Charlie, we just have to go to the UK. We have to go to the UK. And she was like, oh, there was just this weird thing pulling me to the UK, right? So keep that in mind because I'm making a point on that. But so the Hitler comments bombshell at the exact same London event. Transatlantic rights early controversy. At the same December 2018 TPUK launch where she met Farmer, Owens said Hitler was okay until he tried to go global, framing nationalism as fine until it became expansionist. It blew up immediately and contributed to her stepping down from TPUSA comms duties in 2019. This happens while Blexit is still brand new and she's being positioned as the fresh black face of the conservative voice. The UK press and the US left hammered it, yet it didn't slow her PragerU trajectory. So this is sort of like, if you're thinking outside the box, this is the Transatlantic rights edgy free speech test run. TPUK was already struggling with cultural Marxism accusations in Britain, and Owens' comments became Exhibit A for critics saying the US and UK conservative import was too extreme. And Nigel Farage is a very interesting character because he has been displaying himself as one thing, and then when he started his Reform Party, he's showing himself to be not what he said he was. And he's also just, there's a lot of really strange stuff surrounding him that I'm not going to get into. But then she starts hosting the Candace Owens show on PragerU. Now, I started thinking, with her connections with George Farmer now, because she's met him and they're, engaged. And so with her connections with him and all of his connections, why did she go work at PragerU? You would think she could have worked like anywhere, right? And so she starts hosting the Candace Owens show on PragerU in May 2019, right after the TPUK Hitler comments and her TPUSA exit. I find it like sort of interesting that there was this big blow up about her comments surrounding Hitler, but then she goes and works for PragerU. So that's also something I found odd. But PragerU paid her $445,626 in 2019 alone by public nonprofit filings. Meanwhile, Brexit was being bankrolled by many of the exact same donors who funded PragerU and TPUSA. And that's when I was like, okay, they had connections with those donors. So they were the same donors that were bankrolling TPUSA and PragerU were funding Blexit. So I imagine that these insiders, like her husband and people, would know that, and they would know they could get in on that, right? So Dunn Foundation billionaire William Dunn gave Blexit $500K during 2019 and 2020 and also funded TPUSA, PragerU, and anti-Muslim groups. So that's interesting. So the Dunn Foundation, the Go-Go Foundation, tied to the Rinsler family, donated to Blexit plus PragerU, TPUSA. The Rinslers trace back to the Dutch West India Company colonial slave trade error history, which is just really crazy. It's very ironic. Old money funds black exit from the Democratic plantation angle, right? It's just really weird. And also, it didn't do anything. It actually didn't help or it didn't do the cause that it said that it was out to do, right? Other shared funders were the Center of the American Experiment. PragerU, founded by Jewish conservative Dennis Prager, was platforming and paying her handsomely during the height of her Blexit push and early anti-woke phase. Yet by 2004, Prager is writing her a 15-page open letter calling out her rhetoric on Jews, Israel, the Talmud, etc. And it's almost like her and George were really smart about all this. So they linked up with who all the donors were that were donating this in the same group. And then they used PragerU as a respectable launch pad right when Blexit needed mainstream conservative money and credibility. Now, the thing is, while she was at PragerU, she was pretty tame. Okay, it wasn't until the end of her time at PragerU that she started being more aggressive, but there were some things that did go on while she was there to other people in the world, and we're going to get into that as well. So a few other things that were just sort of odd was the Kanye West entanglement, like we've talked about. Blexit launch merch was supposedly designed by Kanye, but he denied it publicly. He seemed to still stay friends with her, like he forgave her. And then remember, they started pushing him to buy Parler, or they were telling people he was going to buy Parler. That's something we'll get into as well. Then we have the elite UK secret society vibe. Farmer was in the Bullington Club, remember? Oxford's infamous rowdy rich kid society. Same one Boris Johnson and David Cameron were in. And this adds a transatlantic elite conservative flavor. US grassroots blexit meets old British aristocracy. Okay, so then you have Farmer's devout Catholicism, and he converted, and he has spoken about wanting to be in a more traditional church, right? And then he starts influencing Candace Owens around the 2019 marriage. And while PragerU is explicitly Judeo-Christian, but Jewish-led. So it's another odd alliance, right? Let's just put this in perspective in a nice paragraph, right? On her rapid rocket ship timeline, okay? In 18 months, she goes from tpusa staffer to blexit founder to a London romance with an aristocrat. PragerU host making nearly $500,000, married with a book deal, Blackout, which came out in 2020. Is that not crazy when you put it like that? So in 18 months, tpusa staffer, blexit founder, London romance to an aristocrat, PragerU host, making $500,000, married with a book deal by 2020. Wild. During her PragerU years, she's already talking about uncancelable spaces. This directly leads to George becoming CEO of Parler in 2021, right as she leaves PragerU for the Daily Wire. The couple basically becomes the face of the build your own tech push. This is almost like a snapshot of how US UK conservative networks, donor pipelines, and personal relationships are fused, all in a couple year snapshot, 2018 to 2021. Okay, so major donors in 2019 and 2020 to Blexit is still the Dunn Foundation, which are Texas billionaires, 500,000 split across 2019 to 2020. Then also the Deason Foundation, which are Darwin and Doug Deason, the Xerox billionaires, 190,000 in 2020. Doug was a tpusa advisor, and family gave millions to Trump PACs. And there were other donors that overlapped the foundations too, that were tied around the PragerU tpusa ecosystem. So it's sort of like her and George latched onto these, right? Okay, so she was already at PragerU when she was getting married, and this is when she announced her marriage.
I am getting married this weekend, so we decided that we were going to make this a wedding special and introduce you guys to my fiance, future husband, George Farmer. Welcome to the Candace Owens Show. Just to give everybody context, we got engaged after 2.5 weeks, maybe?
I think it was about that time, yeah.
Right, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, whirlwind romance. The political philosophy of the West is very much centered around the Anglosphere. It's centered around what Britain and America and the Western nations are doing. And America, as the most powerful nation out of all of them, sets the tone for a lot of what will follow in Western Europe and kind of broader sphere of the West.
We're the most dissatisfied people and the most overprivileged people. How is that possible?
Look, if you live in Siberia, you're not going to have the choice as to whether or not you be a vegan and pick your gender.
Right.
Let's put it like that.
Right.
You know, I mean, you're just not going to have that choice. The decisions that we're making in the Western world today are a result of the luxury of the sacrifice made by the men and women who died in the Second World War and the First World War and ushered in the greatest era of peace that the Western world has ever seen. It's total luxury. These are luxurious choices we're making. By many objective measures, America is the greatest country in the world, many times over.
So are you using me for American citizenship?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Just to be clear, no.
Okay, so you heard what he said there. He was talking about bridging America and the Western Europe, right? And that America was the most powerful out of all of them. And during this time, there was a lot of stuff for Candace to focus on and use her manipulative tactics with, because there was all the stuff going on with woke. So that was what they were able to have her focus on with her ire and her attitude and the way that she reacts to things. now that that's kind of gone away, and as it slowly started going away, she has to focus that on other things. And so if you watch the way she talked about stuff during the woke era, and then you see how she talks about stuff now with her more conspiratorial bent, it's very much the same way that she's doing it. It's just that she doesn't have like woke, nobody cares about that anymore. Nobody wants to sit around and watch stuff about woke. So that's when she pivoted. Okay, now I want to show you guys. So very shortly after starting the Candace Owens show with PragerU, she had Nigel Farage on. And this was in late June, early July of 2019.
Okay. Silence. Ready? Okay, guys, we are rolling into another episode of the Candace Owens Show. We spent a lot of time here talking about what's going on in America with the rise of Trump, the rise of populism. These are things that the left would have you believe is due to this bubble of racism and sexism and misogyny that was just bubbling beneath the surface here in America. But is that true? What about what's going on overseas? What about Brexit? What about what's happening in Italy? What about Salvini? What about Nigel Farage? Welcome to the Candace Owens Show.
Great to be here.
Such an interesting, you and I have a very interesting background. I tell people in this weird way, we were just meant to cross paths. And the earlier story, and I love to tell the story because the best judgment of a character is how people act before you are somebody. And I was an absolute nobody, sprinting around CPAC 2 years ago, trying to give my card and my name to everybody, rushing to be on radio shows. And there was a guy backstage who was very nice to me. And I looked at him and I said, oh my gosh, that's Nigel Farage. And you were just the happiest, nicest person in the entire world. And I said to myself, this is the guy that's leading Brexit. And in that moment, I said, in America, there needs to be a blexit. So you really are the source, not only of the Brexit movement, but of the blexit movement in America.
Well, I loved your energy, you see, that's what it was when I first met you. Loved your energy, and hey, that's why you've got a long way, because you believe in it, you're optimistic, you want to change things. And as you said, there's a lot going on. There's America, there's Italy, but I'm going to make one big boast, all right? We were here first.
These players over in England that are of elite families and aristocratic and are all connected to like Mappin, and he is connected to all these influencers in America and in other places like in Italy, etc., where he's setting up aristocrats with influencers or content creators in all these different countries that are pushing a certain message, right? So I found this really interesting.
Maybe it's we're both crazy enough to believe in the impossible.
But in the sense of a political movement, the campaign for Brexit predates all the other things that were going on. And I kind of think to myself, well, actually, in many ways, the United Kingdom follows America with everything. Fashion, music, financial markets. We follow everything America does. But I think Trump came after Brexit.
Do you?
And I think actually Brexit in a way helped the Trump phenomenon, because what we'd done here was very clearly to take on and beat the global establishment in that referendum. And I think it's been a bit of an inspiration around the world.
Well, I think it's just been symbiotic. I think at the end of the day, as we saw these economies becoming more globalized, people were just starting to feel it. And sometimes it's not about whether or not the sentiment is there. It's about whether or not there's a leader, right? There's a leader to get to the forefront and say, you know what, enough is enough. It's not easy to stand up on a stage and say something that sounds so crazy and impossible, right? I mean, you got up and you said, hey, we're going to leave the European Union.
Yeah, I was saying it for a long time.
A very long time. I mean,
Exactly.
How long?
Well, 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah. No, I felt 25 years ago, I felt that the political establishment in Britain and the whole of Europe had got things wrong. There was a post-1945, a post-war settlement. And, remember, this bitterness and rivalry and constant war between France and Germany had, destroyed huge chunks of the world, dragged America in twice to the conflict. So the idea that post-1945, you have a reconciliation, you start to trade with each other, you start to become friendly with each other as neighbours, all of that made sense. But what I began to see in the late 1980s was that this idea of close cooperation was actually morphing into something else. That rather than being a cooperative structure, it was actually becoming an entity in its own right, a state in its own right, the European super state that they're trying to build, and that this was being done without anybody being asked whether they wanted it. It was being imposed upon.
This is also, he's getting into the international rules-based liberal order that was put in place post-war, that was sort of built up. And it's a huge controversy, and it has grown. So a lot of the stuff he's saying here is super correct, but then later on in life, as we move forward, like what he's doing right now is he's going absolutely against all of that by continuing the whole globalist ideals, putting in to his party all of the politicians who did all that to them, what they have issues with in Europe, right? And so, I don't know, it's just weird.
On them. And there was nothing voters could do to change the structure, because the people in power were appointed, not elected. So these are the first alarm bells that started to ring with me. And I thought then, and I think now, that the nation state is the model that actually works. That's the thing that we feel an allegiance to. That's the thing that we're prepared to pay our taxes to. That's the thing that, in extremis, we're prepared to stand up and defend.
Right. Okay, so remember at the Royal Automobile Club where Mappin was Okay, because Mappin put that whole thing together, and where George saw her is where she said that nationalism isn't a bad thing, and that some people often think it was Hitler, but what he was doing was fine, except for when he tried to expand, right? Now, nationalism isn't a bad thing, but she said it in a really weird way. I don't know. It's not necessarily a bad thing just of itself. It's when you add certain things to it that it becomes different.
And so all of these supranational structures, whether it's the European Union, whether it's the annual gathering at Davos, whether it's elements of the United Nations in New York, these are all attempts actually to diminish the nation state and what it stands for. And that's in a way what is so refreshing about Trump, is that here you have an American president who says, hey, do you know what? We are unashamedly proud of who we are as a country, and we're not going to take orders from anyone.
Well, actually, let's back up, because look, obviously a lot of my listeners are from America. And when we learn about the European Union in our textbooks, it's something that's positive, right? This is something that people should be celebrating.
Yeah.
And look, the Europeans are coming together as countries, and they're holding hands. So then I watch your PragerU video, and the way that you explain it is it's a bit different. What you explain it as is it's like having two governments as opposed to just having one. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said already, the post-1945 idea of reconciliation between warring nations, tens of millions killed, Auschwitz, disasters, whole cities bombed flat, millions of women and children killed, so the whole thing, the awfulness of what happened 75 years ago is perhaps quite difficult sometimes for a young generation to really understand. So the idea that you cooperate and become friends and you have trade and reciprocity and student exchanges and all of those things, that's good. But what we now have is a government in Brussels.
There it is.
And a government in Westminster.
There it is.
So it's layer upon layer of lawmaking, of rulemaking, but...
And who has more power?
But that's the key, you see. That's the key, that actually we've ceded sovereignty to a set of European institutions. We've ceded sovereignty to a foreign court. And at no point in time did anybody tell us this was happening. It was imposed upon us by the great and the good, our betters, the educated classes who just think we're peasants, a bunch of morons, and they think they know what's best for us. And so Brexit, above all, Brexit is a fight back against that. Brexit is saying, we want to govern our own country, we want to make our own laws, we want to live in democracy, and we want the people who make the decisions that affect our lives to be directly accountable to us. We want to be able to sack them at the next election with the European Commission. You can't do that. So, people often misinterpret Brexit quite willfully, quite deliberately. They say that Brexit is a small-minded act. It's the United Kingdom turning in on itself and closing itself off to the rest of the world. It's actually none of those things. Brexit actually is about us becoming a normal nation and normal countries. I mean, you think back through history, what free people ever willingly give up the right to govern themselves? Well, the answer is no one ever does. Right. So Brexit is about re-establishing norms and hopefully leading on to a Europe. And I see Mr. Salvini in Italy and people like him saying very similar things in many ways to what I've been saying for a long time. And what I hope comes out of this is that we get a Europe of sovereign states, of neighbours effectively living in the same street, and we're going to trade together, we're going to be friends together, we're going to cooperate together, we're going to do all the normal things you should want to do living in a street, because, hey, if you all get on, life is kind of better than if you don't. But we've got to end this globalist drive to give away the ability to determine our own futures. And the whole thing's effectively bought and paid for by a handful of giant multinational companies, so, one or two very rich individuals. And they basically would like to see the nation state almost be dissolved. And it's why, in many ways, the Trump victory was so important, because Hillary Clinton was completely sold on this the European Union agenda is basically a prototype for a bigger form of global government and cooperation. And she'd actually said to her friends in Wall Street that she wanted America to join a hemispheric common market.
Because she was a globalist.
Because she was a globalist.
And we were so blessed to have Trump stand up and say, no,
Absolutely.
We aren't doing this. We are keeping our national sovereignty. And I want to say this because when you talk about that, it's such a simple concept, right? National sovereignty. What is there really to debate?
It's funny that she's so against Trump now, because he is sort of still breaking up that whole rules-based liberal world order, right? That it was dominated by the United States, okay? The rules only existed for everyone else but the United States, and the United States really led that whole thing, right? But it's become this crazy bureaucratic institution that has a lot of leftist ideals and Marxist ideals, so it's becoming super problematic, right? And a lot of globalists are in there and they have really strange ideas. Not all of them. Some are just like normal, like, oh, we just want things to be global. But then some of them are like really, really weird with their worldview and their ideology. And so it's just kind of dangerous. But Trump is actually not good for the rules-based liberal order, and NATO and the European Union. They're having all kinds of problems with him and his administration, and they're getting talked down to constantly, right? It's like not going well. You would think she would be for that, right? Even if it's done like in a sort of weird way, like Trump does things, like it's still positive if you're against globalism. So I don't know. Isn't that weird? I don't know. Something is going on with these people.
Why are we referring to this as xenophobia or racism or sexism or whatever, isms that the left likes to come up with? And here's what's interesting. When I decided to name my movement Blexit, there were actually other undertones that I found to be very synonymous with what you were doing over with the Brexit Party. Because what I thought the Black community was suffering from first and foremost was a lack of self-confidence, right? Thinking that you needed the government, you needed more government in order to make things work. And I said to myself, what's happened to our community, right? Why can't we get up on our own 2 feet? Why can't we be independent? Why are we asking for more government? Look at our communities. Our communities aren't doing well. Why are we pretending that we're happy under this structure? And I said, are we suffering? Are we forgetting everything? Is this an amnesia that's descended upon the entire Black community? And I feel in many ways when I speak to people, because I do like to hear both sides, when you hear the arguments from Remainers, I think, oh my God, how sad. You've lost belief in yourself.
Yes, I mean, you're quite right. Your arguments about standing up for your community and putting a different message are almost exactly the same as my arguments as to why we should be a self-governing nation. And I've been using the phrase over the last few months that we're a nation of lions led by donkeys. The donkeys that lead us genuinely don't think we're big enough or good enough or strong enough to run our own country. We have to be part of a bigger European bloc.
Sad.
And it is this basic negativity.
Right.
I think in our case, in the British case particularly, it came because those decades after World War II saw us giving away the biggest empire the world had ever seen.
Right.
We went from being a global superpower to being an economic basket case back in the 1970s with some really hard socialist governments, which we had, very high income tax rates, trade unions running the country. I mean, the decline of Britain in 30 years after the end of World War II is a quite extraordinary story. But despite that, we have recovered. We are the 5th biggest economy in the world. We do actually speak the language that the rest of the world speaks. We've got amazing friends around the world. Nobody else in history has ever had good relations with their former colonies. Normally, former colonies hate their former.
That's correct. I always say that's remarkable how much America loves Britain.
And so we've got the Commonwealth and America, and you think about it, you're looking at, 2.5 billion people, and a third of the world's population, live in these predominantly English-speaking countries, have a shared history with us, and it wasn't always perfect, but it's a shared history that we have, similar values in so many ways. So actually, far from us being too small to survive outside the European Union, we've actually got some amazing advantages. And I was very struck, the other day, Donald Trump was here in London a couple of weeks back. It's a remarkable visit. I mean, this man who was hated by the entire British media, by virtually every politician. I mean, I was almost the only person at one time daring to stand up and say, look, I think Trump's a good guy.
Right, you are.
And I really was. I really was. Even Boris Johnson and co were being very rude about it at the time. And Trump comes to London for an official state visit. And that means, of course, Her Majesty the Queen. It's an invitation from Her Majesty the Queen. And Trump went to Buckingham Palace and inspected the Guard of Honour and had tea with the Queen. And then there was a big, white tie state banquet. He sat next to the Queen. And funny, I was thinking, Trump and the Queen together, the 2 most famous people in the world.
That's actually true.
It really is worth thinking about, isn't it? And clearly, just from the body language, you can see they were having a very good.
She likes him.
Yeah, no question about it. But what was so interesting about Trump coming here for that visit was there was a big message, which was America's ready. We've done our homework. We want to have a much closer economic cooperation with the United Kingdom. Just get Brexit done. And I thought to myself, this is so interesting because it gives a positive alternative to all the negativity we get from government and elsewhere. And if you look at it right now, all right, you're way, way bigger than us, but NATO only exists because of the two of us.
Right.
And it needs some reform, and Germany and the others need to start paying their membership fees. But so already we have this amazing military cooperation between us. We have intelligence cooperation between us at a level I don't think any other two countries in the world have. We trust each other. We share information with each other, and we're on the lookout to combat global terrorism, things like that.
We've fought 2 world wars together. I mean, there's a deep history.
At a huge price, which we commemorated, of course, just 2 weeks ago. I wish I'd been there actually, but to see those hundreds of people in their mid-90s going back to those beaches, and remember, Americans, Canadian, British. We 3 countries actually made these huge sacrifices to save the rest of the world. To save the world. And liberty and democracy and all of these things. And I just felt at the end of that week, it had been an incredibly positive visit from Trump. And I think you'll find his popularity here now is very different to what it was 3 years ago.
I think I don't always love everything Piers Morgan says and does, but I really appreciated watching that week as he really defended the president and said, what is it that you don't like about this man, right? Well, let's get to your arguments. And I think the leftists looked terrible. I mean, they were throwing down old men, this new milkshaking trend that they had going on. Yeah. And you were able to see, to me, this visit really showed which side is really the angry side, which side is really the hateful side. And what are we really talking about here? We're talking about believing in ourselves again. And I want to pause and talk about a little bit about World War II, because this is something that always astonishes me. When I think about the British spirit, like I can just tell you this as an American, right? These are the people that don't give up, even when the odds are stacked against them, even when you really maybe should think about giving up. And that's sort of my depiction of the Brits. Think about Dunkirk. You're on your sailboats. These guys got on their sailboats and said, we're going to go across and we're going to get our boys. That was what England was about during World War II. And what's happened today?
Yes.
We couldn't even try to be alone out of the EU. We couldn't survive. We couldn't possibly do it.
Although it's worth remembering that even then, back in the dark days of 1940, Dunkirk, etc., there were still leading figures in Britain who would have surrendered. So leadership actually is very crucial.
Right. Leadership is crucial.
And Churchill, who is this extraordinary historical figure, and of course, his mother, of course, was an American, and he felt a very strong bond with America. But Churchill was this extraordinary figure who, to be fair, had one of the most checkered and at times disastrous political careers of anybody in the 20th century. I mean, he was involved in some catastrophes, and yet when it came to that particular moment, when the country wanted, and the country was crying out for leadership. You're right. The spirit within the people was there. It just needed
needed
somebody
leader.
to articulate it
Right.
for them.
And what was on the line? National sovereignty.
National sovereignty,
National
democracy,
sovereignty.
liberty, all of those things.
Why can't Remainers see that's really what you're talking about here? It's national sovereignty. It's the same spirit, the same idea that you shouldn't belong to somebody else. Because
they've got this idea that's been pumped into their heads. Much of it, I have to say, through the college and university system, where we have very similar problems on both sides of the pond with this.
Right.
But here's the theory. The theory is that the nation state existing leads to nationalism. Nationalism directly leads to extremism, directly leads to Nazism, directly leads to the Holocaust and catastrophe. And therefore, what we have to do is to abolish the nation state and abolish nationalism. That's the theory.
That's the lie.
That's the theory upon which the whole of the European Union actually is predicated, and their desire for that to become a bigger thing on the global stage. But they get something wrong. Provided the nation state is a functioning democracy, it doesn't go to war. And I've tried this around all the left-wing universities in the UK and a few in America. When we talk about nationalism and what it means, I always say this to them. You give me an example. You give me one example of two mature democracies, mature functioning democracies going to war with each other. There aren't any. So what we should be pushing is not abolishing nation states and handing power up to global bureaucracies. What we need to champion around the world is the concept of democracy. And where you've got democracy, you will have peace. And generally, where you've got democracy.
Okay, so it was interesting. There's several interesting things here that I want to pull out. They mentioned populism. National populism was a thing. Bannon was pushing it, all this stuff, right? When she went to that and he's talking about nationalism, and he just explained a true thing that I've made a video about called the rules-based liberal order or something like that, where there is this mindset that got put into place in people's minds after the world wars, because there was just so much chaos that kept happening, that people got it into their minds and got a worldview that nationalism is bad. And if we have nationalism and we have strong ethno-states, majority white people, like if white people have ethno-states, right, then that will lead to more wars and to another rise in Hitler, and then all the atrocities that happened to people, primarily the Jews, but then like a bunch of other people. So that's why they're so against it, because it's a trauma response. I talk about it in that video that way. What he's saying there is true. Now, what I find interesting is if she just said, Charlie Kirk, I have a feeling there's a reason why we need to go to London. And I don't have that specific clip, but I know you people have seen it, that she's like, and then I took his credit card. I think she was talking to Piers Morgan, but I couldn't find it, or it might be in something I play eventually or whatever. But for right now, just remember that clip where she's explaining how she met George, right? And she was like, there was something pulling me to London. I didn't know what it was, blah, blah, blah. This is after her London trip, right? And so how did she know to answer that question that way when she was at the Royal Automotive Club? Because when she was there, somebody asked her what she thought about nationalism. And then she said, nationalism is not a bad thing, but a lot of times when people think of nationalism, they think of Hitler, right? And then she said what she said, which caused a big hullabaloo. And I'm wondering, she probably didn't mean it the way it came out, but somebody was telling her about that mindset, and it wasn't something people were really talking about back then. That wasn't something going around. And it's sort of niche, like you'd have to know about the international rules-based order and like all this stuff. So it's almost like somebody who had these same talking points and the same stuff had already been talking to her. Do you see what I'm putting down? Okay, so I wondered how because you just hear about this soft launch, right? You just hear, oh, they went to UK to do a soft launch. Well, you can't just go. You can't just go to the UK, right? And be like, hey, we're here to do a soft launch. So I started thinking, how did the soft launch get set up? How did these things get put into place for there to be a soft launch, right? Here's what I found out. So how Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens ended up in London for the Turning Point UK soft launch in December of 2018. So, this was built as a soft launch, but really it was a invite-only reception rather than a massive public event. So it was existing networks plus British hosts that made it happen. Turning Point USA had been discussing a UK offshoot for months. So British conservative activists and students had been reaching out to Charlie Kirk directly. Some attended tpusa events in the US and pitched the idea of bringing the anti-cultural Marxism model to British campuses amid the Brexit chaos. So in England, there was all this chaos with Brexit and they were getting all this bad press, and there were all these like cultural Marxist attacks and media attacks and attacks from other politicians, etc., etc. So they wanted to have some type of counter for that there. People who had connections to Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA started, pitching this idea to him, right? The December 11th, 2018 event at the Royal Automotive Club on Pall Mall in London was an invite-only private reception advertised as a gathering of political genius. So it was called a gathering of political genius. Now, who does that sound like? That sounds like something Mappin would say, right? It was him that put it together. So it was an explicitly soft launch, soft introduction for TPUK, not the full public rollout, which came later with more controversy. But the key British hosts and organizers who pulled it all together was John Mappin, the hotel owner from Mappin and Webb jewelry family, and he's a QAnon supporter, and his wife Irina Mappin. Okay, so they were the primary hosts and the key connectors. Then there was Peter Southall, a businessman, and Lord Tyrone Plunkett and Lady Plunkett, aristocratic host. So there was lots of aristocrats there. These hosts invited Kirk and Owens, coordinated the venue, and handled local logistics. John Mappin later described what started as an idea for a modest dinner of 20 to 30 people, dramatically ignited and boosted interest on both sides of the Atlantic. He hosted a follow-up lunch the next day. The event featured speeches by Kirk and Owens on fighting cultural Marxism, free speech, and building a youth conservative platform. So, attendees included a mix of British right-wing figures like Andy Wigmore, Leave.eu, Paul Joseph Watson, James Delingpole, Nigel Farage's communications people, and others in Brexit reform adjacent circles. Okay? Now, how did Kirk and Owens know all these people? How did they know Mappin? How did they know all these people for all this to get set up, right? Okay, so Candace Owens, as the TP USA communications director, had already built some UK contacts in 2017 and 2018. She had been photographed with figures like Andy Wigmore, Nigel Farage Associates, Paul Joseph Watson, who interviewed her for InfoWars, and Katie Hopkins. Okay, so Candace Owens was already networking, and a lot of those networks were British. They were loose, but real networking ties in the broader transatlantic right-wing scene. Charlie Kirk had received outreach from British students and activists who wanted a TPUSA style group in the UK. And some Brits had visited TPUSA summits in America, and they coordinated via WhatsApp groups. So Owens and or Kirk reached out to UK contacts saying they were coming in December 2018, and that info got passed to people like John Mappin, who stepped up to host the reception and introduce them to the local crowd. And George Farmer, who met Owens at this exact event, later recalled in an interview that Owens pushed for the trip to get Turning Point UK chapter on the map, and the contacts were made through existing UK conservative networks. Now, what if there was some collusion here? Because Candace Owens isn't the only one with a conspiratorial mind. I mean, I have a conspiratorial mind. Now, my mind doesn't necessarily do this. Hopefully, you guys can see that. Shout out to Wolfie. Okay, so this is just the beginning because it gets a lot crazier. This was the first bit of putting together all the conspiratorial stuff that Candace Owens was coming up with. So my mind doesn't necessarily do this. And I'm not so conspiratorial that I am doing, I don't know, this. Yes, that is John Mappin's castle, where he invites influencers and networks with them all. And he has a Q flag flying over his castle that he calls Camelot. I'm not, necessarily that kind of conspiratorial, but Candace Owens could have been talking in these group chats and making connections with right-wing influencers and media people in the UK who then saw an opportunity with Charlie Kirk to take advantage of that and weasel their way in to that donor list, etc., right? And to push their own agenda that they were trying to push, and to join forces with America's influencer network, what they were trying to bring together over in England and European countries, which was this right-wing national populism. Funny how last time we were talking about how George Farmer is connected with news companies, GB News, for example, and how he was influencing them to start bringing in some of Candace Owens' talking points. George Farmer, who met Owens at this exact events, later recalled in an interview that Owens pushed for the trip to get the Turning Point UK chapter on the map, and contacts were made through existing UK conservative networks. So it was a classic conservative movement crossover. tpusa had brand momentum in the US post the 2016 Trump win. British Brexit era activists, students, donors, influencers, wealthy hosts like the Mappins wanted to import that energy. Do you see where I'm going here with the 18-day wedding? They bring Candace there, then they're like, host her a dinner, like, oh, I saw her at the automobile club and I just couldn't, resist her or whatever. And then she's being fed certain talking points that they're saying, and then like 18 days later he asks her to marry him so that he can be connected to a huge influencer force in the new media on the right wing in America, while he's connected back to all these networks in England. Very, very interesting. The host provided the venue, invitations, and introductions. Kirk and Owens flew in as the star American guests to speak and help officially launch the UK branch. They didn't need to personally know everyone in advance. That's what the event was for, making those connections. The soft launch nature of it. It was deliberately low key and invite only at first to build momentum privately among donors and activists. The more public, the official TP UK push came in early 2019 with campus recruitment, but it quickly faced internal drama and media backlash as some recruits distanced themselves after the cultural Marxism framing and Owens's Hitler comments at the same trip. This trip is also the exact moment Owens met Farmer. He was in the orbit and became the TP UK chairman briefly in February 2019. Two rising US conservative stars fly into a fancy London club hosted by British aristocracy, business figures they mostly didn't know yet, and it sparks a movement, a marriage, and a whole transatlantic network. I told Charlie we just have to go to London for some reason. I told Charlie we have to go.
Bad. I will start, obviously, people love to hear the story about how we met because it was, I wouldn't even say a bit like a rom-com. It actually was a rom-com featuring Russell Brand, who does a lot of rom-coms. He's actually known for a lot of rom-coms. And so for those of people that don't know the story, it was a wintry night in London. I was filming a podcast with a very communist Russell Brand, by the way. I would like to be very clear. He was very far on the left. And it was his Under the Skin podcast. It was supposed to be for like an hour. It ended up being 3 hours of filming. And you had a friend, Paul Joseph Watson, who was a mutual friend, but I had never met him. And he and I were supposed to meet up to finally meet off of the internet just to say hi to each other. And he never told me that he had actually organized an entire dinner for me and for Charlie Kirk with about 30 people. So I had no idea that there was a dinner being thrown in my honor in which he kind of pawned it off to you to organize a dinner. So I arrive 3 hours late. My assistant informs me that there are a bunch of people waiting for me. I get out of Russell Brand's house, and I was very apologetic when I arrived 3 hours late because I like to be punctual. And I sat next to you and basically said nothing to me.
Correct. Yeah. I did what I've done for the past 6 years. I just said nothing.
And it worked.
And it worked. Yeah,
it absolutely
and then you
worked.
married me, so I have no idea why.
Yeah. 18 days later,
Yeah, that's right.
we get engaged. And I think the first question that a lot of my audience members have is, how did your family and friends react to that? This American girl just breezes on in, and then you're like, hey, I'm going to get married to this person that I barely know after 18 days.
Well, most of my friends thought that I was crazy, and I'm still not sure they've recovered from that opinion. But the family took it pretty well. I mean, my parents were pretty, they again were like a bit kind of like, okay, this is very crazy, very odd, but sort of we'll go along with it and see where this goes. And then they met you. I think that was a big game changer for a lot of people, because when they meet you, they're always as in awe as I was when I first met you. But they were very receptive, and after a while I think everyone realized that it was real, and that was the really big hurdle to get over, was that everyone initially thought, is this crazy, is this just like a fire-flung romance, and then it was like, okay, this is actually real, this is happening, they're going to get married. And then the mood sort of moved to acceptance, and people got on board, and then they realized how great you were, and then everyone was pretty happy about it.
Did you have any friend who, unbeknownst to me, was like, listen, mate, as they say in the UK, listen, mate, you are making a really bad decision, the worst decision possibly of your life?
No, not really. I mean,
credit to them, or just credit to them?
Yeah, probably. I think it's a credit to them. Yeah, I mean, I think my best man, Nick, who you obviously know very well, his original reaction was, "You're crazy, and this is never going to happen." That was really when I first met you. Like on the first night that we first met, people were very. When I went back from that night, I was like, okay, there's this girl, very interesting. Like this could go somewhere, all that kind of stuff. And his initial reaction was, "You're completely insane." But then by come January, come February, come March of the next year, which was 2019 when we got married, it was like, yeah, this is happening and this is good. This is good. Everyone likes you.
I remember for me, I didn't have anybody in my personal life that was saying, don't do this, but I definitely had people in my professional life who were saying, I will never forget this. Yeah. We have to call him out, right? We do. Charles Kirk, if you are watching right now. But obviously he was very young, and both of us were just so absorbed with politics, and we were traveling together everywhere. Charlie really was like a little brother to me. And I remember he's just like, you just cannot do this. You don't know this person. And then one of the donors to Turning Point USA was telling him it would be very bad for my brand. And that really stuck with me, that one of the donors said, it would be very bad for your brand for you to like not marry a black guy from the projects or something like that.
That's right, yeah.
And I was sort of rebutted.
Do you think it's been bad for your brand?
Sort of
That's
rebutted.
the real question. I think that's like, is it bad for your brand now?
Well, I do not typically consider.
I was hoping that might be the clip. There is a clip of her saying that, but it will pop up when it pops up. So the broader transatlantic right and manosphere circles, Andrew Tate's connection is sort of interesting, right? He knows Candace Owens' husband, and he also knows Paul Joseph Watson. Here's another extreme influencer who brought a lot of extreme ideas to the right side, right? Like a right side influencer who brought in a lot of extreme new things. Okay, and he's also British. Andrew Tate is a British American influencer known for his alpha male masculinity content, kickboxing background, and legal issues in Romania involving human trafficking and R-word allegations. Okay. Good friend of Candace Owens, Paul Joseph Watson, Candace Owens' husband, Honorable George Farmer, and who knows who else in this group, right? While he was not centrally involved in the 2018 Blexit launch or the December 2018 Turning Point soft launch, his links came slightly later and stayed peripheral. The primary connection to Candace Owens is George Farmer, which they have a long time friendship. George Farmer has described knowing Andrew Tate for many years, since before Andrew was Andrew, he says. What does that mean? I don't know. So he says, I knew Andrew before Andrew was Andrew. So in, other words, before he became a massive online personality. Farmer introduced or reconnected Tate to Candace Owens in early 2019, shortly after their December 18 meeting and rapid engagement. Farmer and Tate share overlapping circles in the UK conservative, masculine, anti-woke spaces. Farmer, with his Oxford Bullington Club background, Brexit activism, and later parlor role, and Tate bonded over themes like traditional masculinity, criticism of modern culture, and anti-feminism. This friendship is like a bridge. Owens has said she had met Tate through mutual friends via Farmer in London around the time she and Farmer were dating. So she actually went to Romania with her husband to interview Andrew Tate. That came later. I believe she went there 2 times, actually. While we're going over all these connections, I want to show you guys a video.
To their sons. That is why George Farmer is now called the Honorable George Farmer. This provides him with establishment legitimacy.
For years, I used to say my dad is quite well known in the UK, and for years I was my father's son, and now I've become my wife's husband.
While he begins plotting anti-establishment moves, and that particular thing, these moves combined with his Bullington Club will come back to bite him out in the ass very soon. This is the phase between 2018 to 2019 when George Farmer is heavily involved in politics and also following Nigel Farage around the United Kingdom in politics. They are fighting for Brexit. They've been working on Brexit before now even, but this time Brexit is getting heated and George Farmer is working with Nigel Farage. This is why in part 1 I asked you all, Candace Owens had met Nigel Farage twice, known Nigel Farage, knows his work. She actually was inspired by Nigel Farage Brexit or fight for Brexit to create her own Blexit, the movement of the blacks from voting Democrat, for them to now vote conservative.
The best judgment of a character is how people act before you are somebody. And I was an absolute nobody, sprinting around CPAC 2 years ago, trying to give my card and my name to everybody, rushing to be on radio shows. And there was a guy backstage who was very nice to me. And I looked at him and I said, oh my gosh, that's Nigel Farage. And you were just the happiest, nicest person in the entire world. And I said to myself, this is the guy that's leading Brexit. And in that moment, I said, in America, there needs to be a Blexit. So you really are the source, not only of the Brexit movement, but of the Blexit movement in America.
Well,
she understood and knew who this man is. And she wants to convince us that she left America after meeting this man twice and him inspiring her to create her own Blexit. She did not know of a certain young gentleman who works with him hand in glove in the United Kingdom. Just a question. Maybe she didn't, but I find it highly unlikely that she will not know of that gentleman because any character I know.
It gives me Meghan Markle vibes just a little bit, don't you think? Do you know what I'm putting down? You guys know what I'm putting down.
Who has certain things they do, and those people are around them. There are certain people around them, close proximity to them. I definitely know that these people are in their orbit. And if I'm interested in that person so much that I create a mini organization that is inspired by this person, definitely I know him, I know his entourage. And George Farmer was a huge entourage of Nigel Farage. So all those stories of Candace always telling us that before heading to the UK, she did not know George Farmer. He was just a stranger that she didn't know. I call BS on that. Capital BS on that. Candace Michael Farmer, or is Candace Bullington Farmer, you knew about George Honorable Farmer before reaching there. Please, this is what happens. In 2018, Candace Owens wakes up, tells Charlie Kirk, I want us to go to the United Kingdom. Charlie's like, what are we going to do there? She says, no, I feel it in my.
Don't you guys think this is interesting? You're not the only one who has a conspiratorial mind, Candace. Other people do too. And we can make connections. Really weird ones, like you're awfully close with John Mappin, who calls you the shield maiden of truth. And other weird things, right? Sort of odd. Really odd figure. Like, here he is, John Mappin, with Jeffrey Jones, who I guess is a known PDF. That's weird. Oh, and here's also John Mappin in the Epstein files, allegedly. Because he's listed in Epstein's Black Book on page 35. Epstein recorded 2 numbers and 1 address under this name. The main address for this entry is in London, UK. Why, that's really weird. really, really weird. You know, because the main conspiracies going around right now is that all the elites are into some really weird stuff. Oh, gee, these look like two really elite people. Huh, interesting. I mean, my house doesn't look like that. I can tell you that much right now. Very, very interesting.
Candace Owens wakes up, tells Charlie Kirk, I want us to go to the United Kingdom. Charlie's like, what are we going to do there? She says, no, I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my spirit that we should go to the United Kingdom. So Charlie wants to resist. She takes the man's credit cards and buys the tickets for them to go. And when they head to the United Kingdom, what were they heading for? To launch Turning Point UK. Remember, Charlie has been running Turning Point USA in the United States for a long time and met and hired Candace Owens 10 minutes after meeting her in the United States. And Candace Owens was working as director of urban engagement. And there was a very interesting caveat to her hiring, which we discussed in the first part. Just around the time Candy Baby was hired, there was a slew of racist things coming out of the backbones of people Charlie Kirk had hired working for Turning Point USA. And one of those people is still working with a real George to date. That lady said she hates all black people. She doesn't want to hear about them. F them. And she is still working with a George. So during that time when all of these things were happening, Charlie Kirk hired Candace and Candace was working with him. So that is how Candace woke up. In her director of urban engagement situation, she told Charlie, let's go to the United Kingdom. Before Charlie could open his eyes and say two, she bought the tickets. There is something that was chasing Candace to go to the United Kingdom. She said she doesn't know. She knew what she was going to the United Kingdom for. Remember, listen to the people who are part of the people invited for this launch of Turning Point UK. We have people like John Mappins. We have other people who are part of the United Kingdom. We also have someone like Nigel Farage and his entourage. So are you trying to tell me that Candy Baby didn't know that Nigel Farage, who was one of the few people who made videos promoting the launch of Turning Point UK, as popular as it is, and giving the people he works with, he will not come with those people for that event? You think Candy didn't know that? Okay, let's assume she didn't. Well, please fool yourself, not me. I don't believe it. When they go to the UK, how they met at the Royal Automobile Club in London, and then Candy says she meets George Farmer for the first time. Now, that meeting, you can judge it the way you want, but this is another problem with the meeting of Candace Owens and George Farmer. It's not just that she claims she did not know anything about George Farmer before getting there. It is the number of people who have been called people who brought them together. I remember hearing her tagging Russell Brown, the Christian who he cannot do a podcast without leaving his chest out. He has to have his chest out, all his chest beard, you can count them. His tights are all out, right down to the inner thigh. You have to see everything for him to do that Christian podcast he does. This other info war guys, she said, oh, Alex Jones, why you're running around insulting me? Don't forget that you're the one who introduced me to my husband. I'm like, lady, how many people are we talking about here? How many people? John Mappins, the person who is linked to all kinds of things. If you want us to do a video on John Mappins, we can do it. But the man is linked to all kinds of things. Remember when Charlie Kirk expired and then Candace Owens was having a lot of backlash online. Do you remember the only people who wrote a public letter telling the FBI to release all information to Candace Owens, for Candace Owens and her team to do the investigation? Yes, that John Mappin is one of the people who organized this opening of Turning Point UK. He was one of the donors.
In our view, the official investigation should be immediately ordered by the appropriate legal authority to proactively share everything they know with Candace and her selected team.
So this guy, John Mappin, I'm assuming he is at least all put together enough to, I don't know, put together an event, run a hotel where he has really important people come to it, and run this whole business and this whole like thing that he's got going on, being like an elite person. So I'm assuming he's put together enough to do that, to know that the FBI is not going to release information to Candace Owens in a murder investigation. So that in and of itself is very, very, very weird, unless he was signaling to somebody. Nobody in their right mind thinks that the FBI, oh, okay, well, this British elite person says we should release what we have to Candace Owens, a podcaster. And then Candace Owens reads it on her show like it's a serious thing.
Her husband. And John Mappin has also claimed that he is one of those who introduced Candace Owens to her husband. You know what? There is a lady who did a very good job at explaining this meeting. Please, I am not going to waste time. Let's have her explain this. If you know her name, please let me know. I couldn't find her name. I found this video on someone's page called Kraus. And I don't know if she's the one who's the author of the video, but it seems she just posted it. So if you know the author of this video, please let me know and I'll link it and give their credits below.
Candace Owens and George Farmer have not been able to collaborate effectively on what to tell the public about their relationship and how they met. Candace Owens has credited several different people for introducing her to George Farmer. She credited Russell Brand for introducing her to George Farmer first.
Apparently, he asked you to marry him 19 days after you met, which is very English.
Yes,
That
Russell Brand was our Cupid.
Really?
Yeah, he was.
Well, let's hear this, because I'm fascinated. 19, so what happened? You guys meet
Okay, so this I think is the clip. Hopefully this is the right part in the clip.
where?
So a buddy
This
of
is George, your husband.
Yeah, Turning Point UK was hosting an event. George was there. I didn't get to meet him. I then went to do Russell Brand's podcast on the countryside, and through a lot of miscommunication, nobody had told me that my now husband was hosting a massive dinner with like major players in politics, like Douglas Murray was there that night. You know, all of these fantastic people. So I was 3 hours late because I was with Russell Brand doing his Under the Skin podcast. And this is amazing because this is when he was a communist. You know, this was the old Russell Brand. And then my assistant kind of comes in and is like, "There's a massive dinner for you," and I'm like, "I have to go. There's a random guy named George Farmer hosting a dinner for me." Jumped in the car, went down to Belgravia. 3 hours late, and my husband's just plying everyone with red wine. Like, is this woman even coming? And I don't know, I just locked eyes with him and just knew that I was going to marry him. It was totally insane. Literally, and it's funny because his best man then read the text messages.
I thought she locked eyes with him at the automobile club. Candace, there's too many holes in the story, too many plots.
George was sending to him, like, "I'm going to marry this girl." And I was sending messages to my sister, like, "I'm going to marry
From
this
that
guy."
night?
Like, locked eyes. If this is like a true rom-com story featuring Russell Brand, yeah.
Was it just the accent?
No,
You can be clear.
everyone had an accent.
Do you find this accent irresistible? Is that
Americans do like an English accent, so I will say that it is a plus. But everyone there had an accent. It was just his face. He didn't even speak to me. He was so nervous. And then he flew to meet me the following week at Turning Point USA's big conference they have every December. And it was just, I just knew it was the strangest thing. And then he proposed to me. We didn't even kiss, nothing. Didn't even know if he had a girlfriend. And
You've not even had a date, really?
we didn't even have a date. We had our first kiss in Terminal 5.
Really? That's very romantic.
It is.
It's like Love Actually.
It is Love Actually.
But John Mappin, who has ties to Jeffrey Epstein, also takes credit for introducing Candace to George Farmer.
Dang, that wasn't the clip. I mean, that's where I saw it, is in that interview, but I couldn't find that interview. I don't know.
Candace has openly given him credit to introducing them. It reads, "That auspicious and star-crossed night on 11th December 2018, when you, Candace, and Charlie first arrived in London to launch Turning Point to this nation and changed our lives' trajectories, including that of tpusa. When George arrived at this tpusa function, I recall uttering the now memorable words, 'I don't believe you have met Lord Farmer's son, Candace.' One has made a few introductions in one's time, but the introduction of Turning Point to the United Kingdom that night, the introduction of Charlie's and your philosophy and way of thinking, and most joyfully our introduction of you to your loving husband, George, ranks up there for sure." This account by John Mappin completely contradicts the story that Candace Owens told Piers Morgan. Candace gives another good story. Alex Jones telling his audience my husband is MI6 is hilarious. Yes, he left the part out where I met my husband through InfoWars host Paul Joseph Watson. Here's a picture from that fateful night in December of 2018. Candace Owens gets very defensive when confronted with the inconsistencies of her stories pertaining to her meeting her husband. So she strings together all three instances of them being introduced in 2 days, where they're somehow introduced over and over and over again without actually being introduced, to then falling in love at first sight, or technically second sight. But that's not how George Farmer recalls it.
But I meet her. So she was giving a speech in London, and she was giving a speech at the Royal Automobile Club, which is a club in Pall Mall in London. And I was in the audience. We met, we shook hands, and I just knew, kind of, when I met her, I was like, this is a woman who, she just commanded a power. It was very difficult to describe. Nothing romantic was said, you know, between that day and the day that we got engaged. Nothing romantic was said at all. You know, there was no overtures. Like, we didn't go for dinner. Like, we didn't take it. Nothing.
Flowers.
No, nothing. Yeah, nothing exactly. And
So just to give everybody context, we got engaged after 2.5 weeks, maybe?
I think it was about that time. Yeah,
Right,
that's right, yeah.
right, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, whirlwind romance, I believe.
I know.
Nothing had been said. Like, there'd be no romantic overtures at all at any of this point. It had all just been very kind of above board and talking about politics and engaging in kind of philosophical conversations. And then at the end of December, we started. I called her a couple of times just to kind of chat, and again, you know, just had these long, like, prolonged conversations, which were mainly about politics and trying to understand what she wanted to do in life. And at the end of December, I was actually flying to Africa at the time for New Year's, and I called her and I just said, "Listen, I know this is completely crazy and we've just met, but how do you feel about getting married to me?"
Just real quick, I missed the bit where there was any sort of.
There was literally nothing romantic had been said up to this point.
Okay.
I mean, literally
So I
nothing.
guess I missed nothing.
We hadn't gone on a date. We had not talked about marriage or the future or anything like that.
All right.
And she said yes.
No.
Yeah,
Come on.
she did.
That didn't happen.
Yeah, she.
You're making it up.
I want us to look at this timeline once more because there's someone I want us to include into it. In December 2018, Candace Owens asked for Charlie Kirk's credit card, buys a ticket to go to the UK. Then she allegedly meets George Farmer for the very first time. They set eyes on each other. December 29, 2018, 18 days after that meeting, George Farmer proposes to Candace Owens via FaceTime. He had visited her in her hometown and come back, then proposed the question when he was heading to South Africa and say, "You know what, if this plane goes down, I would like to propose, will you marry me?" And she said yes. Remember this. Shortly after this engagement of theirs, Candace Owens goes to a very important trip. But let me pause you on that trip first. In 2016, Andrew Tate participated in the Big Brother show UK in 2016. In 2017, Andrew Tate moved to Romania because he believed that Romanian authorities would be less likely to pursue allegations of sexual assault if anything happens. He goes there. That is in 2017.
Andrew and his brother Tristan Tate moved to Romania in 2017. They relocated from the UK to Bucharest, Romania, and set up in a large, heavily fortified suburban compound, often described as a converted warehouse with armed guards and luxury cars. They ran multiple businesses there, including webcam operations, casinos, and later online ventures. Andrew Tate said in interviews that he liked Romania because corruption is accessible for everybody and found it offensive that British police wouldn't take bribes. In one notable interview, he claimed the prospect of facing R-word allegations and charges more easily was probably 40% of the reason for the move, adding, "I'm not an effing R-wordist, but I like the idea of just being able to do what I want and being free." He is, by the way, an effing R-wordist. He later framed this as criticism of Western litigation culture and false accusations rather than an admission. He has also said he first visited Romania years earlier for a kickboxing fight, fell in love with the place, and eventually stayed long term.
After Candace Owens and George Farmer are engaged, guess where Candace Owens goes? She goes to Romania, where she meets with Andrew Tate and his brother. She has even spoken about it, how she went there and has.
Okay, so I couldn't find any information about Candace going to Romania with Paul Joseph Watson that early, because this was 2023 and then again in 2024, I believe, when she went to Romania to visit Andrew Tate. So I looked into it some more. Candace Owens was introduced to Andrew Tate during either a 2018 to 2019 London networking period. So I asked more about that. In early 2019, likely January to March 2019, after Owens and Farmer had been dating and were engaged, Farmer introduced Owens to Tate. Farmer has repeatedly stated in interviews that he has known Tate for many, many years, since before Andrew was Andrew, before Tate became the massive online top G personality. Their friendship predates Owens entirely and stems from overlapping UK conservative, masculine, anti-woke circles, Farmer's Oxford Bullington Club background mixed with Tate's kickboxing business hustle, which still to me does not make sense, because where do those worlds cross? Owens herself has confirmed in podcasts that she has met Tate only a handful of times total. She counts it on her fingers, with 2 of those being formal interviews she did with him much later in 2023 and 2024 in Romania. She describes the earlier introduction as low-key and not a big hangout. Paul Joseph Watson is a recurring mutual figure in the broader 2018-2019 London scene. He attended the TP UK soft launch and was a mutual online acquaintance of Owens and Farmer, but he is not described as the person who directly introduced Owens to Tate. Watson has his own independent friendship with Tate. They appeared together in right-wing circles around that era, so he may have been in the wider social orbit, but not the primary link to Farmer and Tate. So he has his own link to Tate. Okay. No large group dinner or public event is documented as the exact moment of the Owens-Tate introduction. It appears to have been a private, informal meetup arranged through Farmer shortly after the romance with Owens began.
Her then assistant, who was Romanian, told her that that guy is a pimp. I think it's a pimp. Yeah. And that was her had then a fiance's best friend, or one of his very best friends, and who had just moved to Romania just a year earlier, because he was trying to ensure that when him and his brother carry out the activities they have been carrying out, because they have been doing what they
Okay, so the stuff that Andrew Tate started doing in Romania, he was doing in London on a smaller scale. And he has a bunch of charges there because there have been things he has done to women there that are highly illegal and like insane. Like the story, and he's on Okay, so the thing about Andrew Tate is, do you guys ever watch that lawyer, what's his name? Bruce Rivers? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And Bruce Rivers, the criminal lawyer. Have you guys ever watched that show? Anyway, he has in his intro song, he has the self-snitching, and he says, "Do not self-snitch." Andrew Tate is the king of self-snitching, okay? So the guy does nothing but self-snitch constantly. And so there are actual recordings that I've heard of him leaving voice messages to a victim in the UK where he is graphically describing everything she said that he did to her back to her and saying, "I would do it again. You know, all these horrible words and stuff." And then he describes what he did to her and all this stuff in a voice message. Yeah, so he has this thing where he's just everywhere he goes is violently. He came, when they came to America, he has charges now again because while he was here, he, you know, started hanging out with some girl. I can't remember her name. And then he brutally violated her in the hotel room because she thought she was just, it was gonna be like normal, you know what I mean? But then it like wasn't, and she thought she was gonna die. She was like so hurt from what happened, and all that's like in the court filings for that. Then the stuff he was doing in Romania, once him and his brother set up shop there, was he was involved in human trafficking because he was using the lover boy method. Him and his brother both were, where they would find girls online, start a relationship with them, some underage, and then they would talk to them in a way where they thought they were dating Andrew Tate or his brother. And then, you know, and they would be like super like love bombing, gushy, all this stuff, get them to Romania. And they didn't only do this to US girls, they did this to like girls all over. Get them to Romania and then take their passports and their IDs and everything, and then lock them in a warehouse where they had to do webcam work for grueling hours a day, and they had no way to really escape because they're in a bad area in Romania with no passport, no money, nothing. Then what happened was they did this to a girl. They got a girl from Florida to go to Romania, and then when she got there, she was able to get a text message out to her parents saying, it's really weird. Like, I thought I was going to be staying in a house, but I'm locked in this like warehouse type building with a bunch of girls, and it's really weird. And so the parents got freaked out, and they called their like family member who was a Marine or family friend who was a Marine, and told them like what she had said to them. And then he called the US Embassy and reported it. And so then Romanian officials raided the compound and found all these girls locked in this warehouse. So that's where all those charges come from. And they were doing all kinds of other stuff that was illegal there too, having to do with like organized crime and the casino and stuff. And they were literally doing this up until the moment, like that's how they got caught. So when Candace Owens tells people, oh, this was like 10, and Tucker Carlson, oh, this was 10 years ago. This was not recently, right? Yeah. She's fine with that though, you know. Oh, and they would also like abuse them if they didn't do what they said with items, like beat them and stuff like that. So that's fine, you know, no big deal. Look, I'm going to be real honest with you guys. If I can't get people to subscribe or like, YouTube will literally send aliens to my house. Do you want me to be probed? I need you to like and to subscribe. Thank you.
called online with women. We discussed this already on this channel a long time ago. Him and his brother have been carrying out those kind of activities, webcamming activities, since 2012. He was doing it in the UK, but by 2017 he realized that the type of activities he's carrying out can put him in trouble in the UK. He left for Romania, and then after Candace Owens and George Farmer get engaged, shortly after that they go to Romania. You see how this is working? Do you remember when Andrew Tate blew up on the internet?
So I don't think they went to Romania. I think Andrew Tate came to England, and that's where this picture is taken, which is really weird. I don't know. This is just weird.
Don't worry, we are coming to that. Launches and Farmer becomes the chairperson. The rollout is famously mocked. Like we've said, you cannot be saying that you are launching a grassroots kind of organization and you carry a big Burlington Club elite son of Lord Michael Farmer, the elite of elite, and you put in the front pipe of that in the name of a chairperson, and he was running the foreshadow of everything. It was a full sham. People made fun of him. They made fun of Turning Point UK's launch so much, primarily because of George Farmer's participation in that launch. He was a terrible mix inside. Nigel Farage was not a problem. He was normally part of the far right. Yes, he gets his donors, and George Farmer has always been one of the people who put money on him. But then, when George Farmer engaged himself too publicly in something like Turning Point UK, it called for a lot of mockery online. The memes were memeing. It was so funny. Some of those accounts are even still active till date. The accounts that were making fun of George Farmer after the launch of TPU UK. In 2019, George Farmer stands as a candidate for Nigel Farage's Brexit party in Southeast England. Guess what? He is not elected. What was he thinking? Well, it has happened before, so maybe he was thinking it could happen for him. But I believe that his running was not to win a seat, but it was to prove to Nigel Farage that I am ready to be part of this new right movement we are forming. So you don't have to worry. If it means putting my name on a ticket, even if I don't win, I will put my name on that ballot box. Let me know what you think was the reason George Farmer ran for this position, even if he did not see himself winning, or if he thought that maybe he would win because he had the backing of Nigel Farage, this guy who is running Brexit. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, especially the British. Americans, please be quiet. He is not elected, but he spends his time campaigning and traveling with Nigel Farage, learning the insurgent playbook with Nigel Farage. Did I tell you that he went and talked to Andrew Tate just after engaging in 2018? Yeah, good. So while he's learning the playbook of Nigel Farage, he goes and sees his friend and says, no, my friend, in my mind, this is now all conspiracy land. We are in Candy land right now. Say, you know what, my friend, I'm learning the ropes from Nigel Farage. Because he was asked in an interview, who do you think sparked all this new right and all this outrageous political movement? He said, Nigel Farage. So when he learned it, he went and called Andrew Tate and said, oh, my friend, you see this internet thing you're doing? You're about to blow up. I'm learning the ropes, and when I'm done, you will see. And he made Andrew Tate to blow up. On the 31st of August, 2019, Farmer and Owens marry at Trump Winery in Virginia. Nigel Farage was present as guest of honor, cementing the political union. Let's look at phase 2, the tech and media expansion phase. That is between 2020 and 2023. These are key important parts. In 2021, Farmer is appointed CEO of Parler, the free speech social media app, following the firing of its founder after the January 6 Capitol riots. In October 2022, Farmer facilitates a deal for Kenya West Ye to buy Parler. The deal eventually collapses after Ye's controversial public outbursts. Also in 2022, around November, journalists...
Okay, so George Farmer started positioning himself as a tech, like freedom tech, like uncancelable platform. Him and Candace Owens they started doing that kind of stuff. So you had the Freedom Phone that we went over last time. That was all like a big scam that they made a bunch of money off of. Then there was the Glorify banking app failure scam sort of thing. Okay, so I have a video that we can watch, a couple going into this whole Glorify thing. So let's start with this one just so we can get a overview.
The next story is kind of more fun.
So sad for all of our Glorify consumers out there.
You know, there's a serious angle to the story. And so here's the story. We can put up the first element. Glorify, which I hadn't actually been following that closely, but it was the anti-woke bank you may have heard about from Candace Owens, or you may have heard about from Crystal's just absolutely beautiful, pitch perfect takedown of Candace Owens. But it was an anti-woke bank that was intended to combat ideological capture in the financial industry, which is actually a very real thing. From the Wall Street Journal, it reported they raised about $50 million from this top group of investors. In July, they had announced this deal to merge with an acquisition company. And it just sort of, the wheels came off over the course of the last several months, especially in the fall. The Journal had a big piece, I think it was just in October, about mismanagement at Glorify. And so whether this is a response to a lack of demand or monopolistic market forces, or is it just mismanagement is an open question. But it is really interesting that Glorify, with all of this money, I mean, it was valued at 1.7 billion in that deal, 1.7 billion.
Which shows like the hollowness of valuations a lot of times.
Well,
So just get a lawyer in and some people like write down that it's worth 1.7 billion. And they show you a couple charts and the charts go like this. Oh, how about that? 1.7 billion.
It's nice.
Yes.
And then that though said they had to raise $60 million in extra cash. So that was sort of a blow at the time because that's a lot of money to have to raise. But at the same time, to your point, the valuation was super high. I think the valuation is high. Maybe not that high if we were being real.
Zero now.
Well, no, yeah. But I meant in theory.
Who do you think they used to raise all those funds? You know, Candace Owens is in with all these donors, all these conservative donors, right? Like pretending like she's for all this stuff and she's putting herself in places where she can leech off donors of all these groups, right? I think that's why they're joining up with all this stuff that we keep finding out is like a scam, because they can bring in the donors.
The valuation for a company that can do what it's doing should be high. I don't know if 1.7 billion high exists, but there's also an interesting question. I'm curious for your take on this about whether this alternative economy that was talked about so much over the last couple of years by people, including myself, although I always saw it as a temporary thing, like the alternative economy ramps up because there is a demand for instance, like razors that aren't like what the Daily Wire did with Jeremy's razors. Like people really don't like what Harry's was doing.
What were they mad about with that?
They had Harry's responded to.
He was mad about woke razors.
Right, one person, a person with like very few followers, tweeted at Harry's that they were upset about something Michael Knowles, one of the.
Okay, now let's dive a little bit deeper into this Glorify company, shall we?
On October 28th, just 1 month ago, Candace Owens tweeted an encouraging message to her 3 million followers. We are at the beginning of the conservative economy. You guys will all be hearing about Glorify soon. It will overtake Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, and PayPal very quickly. Now fast forward just 1 month to November 22nd, 2022, and the right-wing banking app Glorify has announced that it's shutting its doors forever. Bummer. The company didn't fail after only 2 months of launch just because having a right-wing banking app is a stupid idea, even though it is. But there were many, many other problems too, including a founder who allegedly ran the offices out of his 16,000 square foot mansion, where former employees say that he would frequently get drunk, volatile, and belligerent. I would almost be willing to bet that you've never even heard of Glorify, but it's basically an online bank that considers itself an anti-woke fintech startup. The company promotes what it considers to be pro-America values like capitalism, family, law enforcement, and the freedom to celebrate your love of God and country. Quick disclaimer here. This video isn't to bash any particular political party. I'm really not a political guy. Ultimately, I don't feel that it matters whether you are right wing or left wing when both wings are on the same bird. If that bird flies into the fire, both wings just burn up anyway. I thought I just needed to sprinkle that little disclaimer on you. Anyway, the startup was founded by Toby Nigelbauer and his wife Melissa, who began working on Glorify less than a year ago. Now, although I personally think that being a right-wing bank isn't really enough of an advantage since it doesn't really impact the quality of your banking experience, political party loyalty convinced tens of thousands of people to rush to Capitol. So I guess a bank offering a pro-America, pro-capitalism, pro-MAGA, pro-Donald Trump message could potentially draw millions of people too. All it would take is enough money to get started and the right backers. And Glorify did this pretty quickly, raising more than $50 million within just a couple of months. And when it comes to backers, the startup has some major names supporting it. Candace Owens obviously backed it, and she became a spokesperson and a co-founder. Hedge fund billionaire Ken Griffin invested in the company, and so did Peter Thiel, who co-founded PayPal with Elon Musk. However, the Peter Thiel connection really...
Okay, so let me read you about this. The Glorify saga pitch was anti-woke fintech for conservatives, bullet casing credit cards, gun owner insurance discounts, legal bills covered if you shoot someone in self-defense. HQ was literally in his Dallas mansion. So it was this guy, Ted Neugbauer, a Texas oil gas investor, private equity guy, and serial entrepreneur who became the face of one of the most spectacularly messy conservative parallel economy flameouts of the 2020s. Glorify, the self-proclaimed anti-woke bank. Here's the full crazy dossier. Everything documented over the top or straight from court filings, wild about him, is what I'm about to tell you. So it was in his Dallas mansion, that's where headquarters were, a replica of the White House that later listed for $40 million. He raised $50 to $55 million from backers Peter Thiel, Ken Griffin of Citadel, Vivek Ramaswamy. And the thing about Vivek Ramaswamy being on here is not surprising to me because he's in the Thiel universe. He is part of the Midwestern, the BAP scene, the Midwest, what do they call it? The Midwest aesthetics. They're both from Ohio. That's part of it. The stuff that Vivek Ramaswamy has been in before has also been super sketchy. Like he was part of the PPP or the PP show scam where they scammed him, and Bill Pulte scammed all that money from the GameStop people. A whole group of these people that they preyed off of a while back and got a bunch of money off of, and it was really sick. And Vivek Ramaswamy and Ian Carroll and Bill Pulte were a part of that. They actually flew Ian Carroll in on a helicopter to the big event that they did. All these people are backers, right? Joe Lonsdale, Jeff Sprecher, NYSE owner, Nick Ayers, ex-Pence chief of staff, and others. Candace Owens was a heavy promoter, co-founder, and face of the brand. Very odd. The meltdown. So employees described a volatile, boozy office culture. After 5 p.m., Toby starts shrinking and things at the house deteriorate quickly, one person said. Former HR head said staff were warned to leave early. One meeting had Neugebauer visibly drunk, mixing Red Bull and alcohol. He allegedly pressured investors with lines like, "You're the deciding vote, and we will file bankruptcy this afternoon." Independent investigations into his behavior triggered liquidity crisis. The company went from 1.7 billion SPAC valuation to shut down in 2 months. App launched September 22nd, dead by November 22nd. Filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy February 2023. The post-challenge lawsuit war from 2024 to 2026. And so this is where it gets real crazy. Ongoing federal and bankruptcy court drama. Trustee versus Neugebauer. Bankruptcy trustee Scott M. Seidel sued him and his family entities for breach of fiduciary duty, securities fraud, negligence, gross negligence, and self-dealing. Allegations transferred millions in assets to companies he controlled while knowing Glorify was insolvent, ran roughshod over board governance, created cash crisis to force deals favoring himself. Court filings call it destructive self-dealing and say he blamed everyone, investors, media, the Chinese, etc., except himself. Neugebauer's countersuits. He and affiliates filed RICO racketeering lawsuits in Georgia and Delaware against Thiel, Ramaswamy, Griffin, Lonsdale, Ayers, and others, claiming a billionaire cabal conspired to sabotage Glorify, steal trade secrets, launch copycat companies, example Strive, and trash his reputation. He's seeking $100 million in personal damages plus triple RICO damages. Law firm Bloodbath. The trustee also sued 2 big law firms, Winston and Straw, for $1.7 billion, and earlier Chapman and Cutler for malpractice, claiming they enabled Neugebauer's self-dealing because he was their prized self-proclaimed billionaire client. 2025 court rulings are that the judge have let some of Neugebauer's personal claims to proceed while the trustee keeps pursuing the self-dealing case. One filing literally says, "The story of Glorify's demise cannot be understood without appreciating Mr. Neugebauer's unyielding desire to exercise singular control over the company at all costs and complete disregard and disdain for corporate governance." The political, so other crazy stuff about this guy. Political sugar daddy. In 2015, he was the sole $10 million donor to a Ted Cruz super PAC, Keep the Promise 2. His dad was longtime GOP Congressman Randy Neugebauer in Texas. Current life, still ultra wealthy, now CEO and co-founder of Fermi America, nuclear-powered AI data centers in Texas with Rick Perry, launched 2025 and hit a $12.5 billion valuation. They live between Dallas and Aspen. Part owner of Austin FC MLS team, has a beloved Great Dane named Ivy. Personal vibe from reporting described as hard-charging Texas oil man who demands total control. Court documents and ex-employees paint him as someone who mixes big conservative ideals with very human and litigious flaws. just normal people that Candace Owens and her husband hang out with and make all these deals with, and she probably made a bunch of money, but yet she's still not getting, like, she gets away with everything, right?
He isn't that surprising. He's made his conservative beliefs quite clear over the years, and he was one of the largest donors to Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. He's also a major investor in Rumble, which is the first alt-right social media platform to go public, and he invested $1.5 million into an invite-only right-wing dating app called The Right Stuff. So basically, you could probably take anything, make it the right-wing version, and raise tens of millions of dollars. For example, here I have an energy drink. And here,
So it seems like a bunch of people, including Candace Owens and her husband, figured out this scam to scam conservatives, because it's not the only scam they were involved in. They were involved in that phone scam, and they're involved in another one that I'm going to tell you about.
I have a right-wing energy drink. And in my opinion, that's literally all Glorify offers. It's really no different than any other bank. It offers savings and checking accounts. You can apply for a credit card just like you would do at any bank. But the difference is, well, now you can have a checking account with an American flag debit card. Wow, how exciting. But ask the founder what makes the business so much better, and he would say something like, we created the marketplace where hard-working, freedom-loving people can enjoy big tech without having to sacrifice their values. And in the world of startups, politics, and the media, well, that's pretty much just a really fancy way of saying absolutely nothing. On July 25th, even before launching, Glorify had already agreed to go public and had a valuation of $1.7 billion. Yeah, you heard me correctly. A $1.7 billion valuation for a company that hadn't even earned a penny. And again, outside of this right-wing messaging, Glorify really offers absolutely nothing different or nothing better than any one of the other 1,500 banking apps that are out there. But the catch was, in order to go public, the company would need to raise at least $60 million in additional cash. In September of 2022, Glorify launched to the Apple App Store after many failed launch attempts. And then just a few weeks later, on October 10th, a Wall Street article came out exposing Glorify and its founder. The article claimed that the tech was weak and glitchy, the company was laying off large portions of its staff, and the team had pretty much burned through all of its money. The article explained how the entire operation was running out of the founder's Dallas mansion, and how Bauer would constantly drink and showcase volatile behavior towards his staff members. The article even talked about some of the crazy ideas that came up during meetings, like making credit cards out of shell casings and offering homeowner insurance policies that would grant discounts to gun owners. Now, some misinformed people would say that all press is good press, but in today's cancel culture generation, that's absolutely a myth. Nobody wants to put their money into a bank that will likely close, and especially one that's run out of some drunk dude's house. Just 1 week after the article dropped, Bauer stepped down as CEO. And by step down, I mean he was probably forced to step down from investors that were trying to protect their investment. This move wouldn't be enough to change anything though, because on November 21st, not even 2 whole months since Glorify launched, the company announced that it was officially closing its doors forever. And given the details, are you even surprised? I mean, I'm not, because even if some diehard right-wing investor would invest $10 million into my energy drink, it's still a dumb product. Or maybe Glorify just picked the wrong PayPal founder. If they got Elon Musk to buy into it, maybe it would have taken off. Because honestly, everything Elon Musk seems to touch turns into gold. And if they would have followed his playbook, which I explained in this video right here, then maybe they would have lived to see another day. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care and keep doing amazing.
Okay, so I don't know how many people noticed this, but this is something that I noticed because I pay attention to a lot of things, and I pay attention to a lot of spaces. And one of those spaces, for a while anyway, I'm not so much anymore, but one of those spaces is the cryptocurrency world. And even though I don't have any myself, especially around certain people, like certain influencers, certain people who have like a celebrity about them. And so I started noticing a couple years ago, right-wing influencers were starting meme coins, like coins, and then rug pulling them. Like Andrew Tate did it, and a bunch of other people. Let me see if I can pull up. So you had Andrew Tate, Hawk Tua, a couple like representatives. There were just like all these people. And another thing, like the Hawk Tua girl, like she had no idea what she was doing. What would happen is people who do know what they're doing in the industry would latch on to somebody who is a rising star, rising influencer, like had a sphere of influence. They would latch onto them and then talk them into like making a coin. Right? And then they don't really know what they're doing. So it's sort of like these people in the back pulling the strings that are like insider crypto people, right? First, let's watch the video.
Today we'll talk about why Let's Go Brandon was a rug pull. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's head into it. The mega-themed Let's Go Brandon Ethereum cryptocurrency has fallen on tough times, so much so that the value of all 330 trillion coins totals just a few $1,000s combined. A far cry from the days of pro-Trump investors believing they could strike it rich in the ever-complex world of crypto. That represents a 99.5% decline over the last 30 days, leaving a singular LGB coin effectively worthless. At the end of last year, the coin, which carries the saying "Let's Go Brandon," spiked in value after it received a boost from D-list Trump world acolytes and found itself being promoted on the hood of NASCAR driver Brandon Brown's race car. A month prior, the slogan had found its legs when Brown gave a post-victory interview with NBC reporter Kelly Stavast. The crowd could be heard loudly chanting "Joe Biden," but the sports reporter mistook the crowd for "Let's Go Brandon." From that point forward, it became a pro-Trump rallying cry from the likes of Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who began to use the term Brandon administration to Senator Ted Cruz, touting the secretly crude anti-Biden phrase. Trump world quickly got hooked on saying it in public. A group of enterprising crypto enthusiasts seized on the viral moment by creating their own cryptocurrency and attempting to sponsor the driver's racing team. Those dreams vaporized in January when NASCAR abruptly intervened, declaring that it wouldn't allow the sponsorship deal to go through. Despite prior approval from a company employee, the coin's demise followed in short order, even as LGB signed a 2-year, 8-figure sponsorship agreement with a driver. To some observers, the collapse was a foregone conclusion. They tried to monetize on a viral outbreak. Did it surprise me when something without value shot up and immediately shot down upon release? No, said David Silver, an attorney who has represented aggrieved crypto investors since 2014. And though the crypto markets are riddled with scams, according to Tim Swanson, who blogs about crypto and works as head of market intelligence at the blockchain company Clearmatics, the danger to investors is always higher with niche meme coins.
The entire crypto sphere is riddled with scams. That's basically all it is now, because it is so easy to manipulate. Enough people have enough of a coin, they can control it and have it go up and down when they want it to. And so people like you and me, we're just like really screwed. It's not good.
Larger coins have higher trading volumes, so when a company insider sells a huge amount of their stake, it generally won't significantly dilute prices for everyone else, he said. With meme coins, however, average investors are at the mercy of insiders, who know exactly when they're going to sell. Once they do, he added, the coin's value effectively drops to zero. At the LGB coin's peak in early January 2022, the coin had a liquidity pool worth north of $6.5 million. That pot of money has since dried up, leaving a liquidity pool of less than $10,000. On Twitter, the organizing group behind LGB pledged to airdrop investors a new and improved coin, ostensibly swapping out something worthless for something with an artificially designated value. David Silver, the crypto lawyer, was skeptical. The free market has already said, this is a coin that has no value, he said. Simply rebranding and trying again is merely trying to take a second shot at convincing someone to give you value where no value exists. Some apparent investors seem skeptical as well, that their $15,000 investment had plummeted to just a couple of $100. Another expressed alarm that their 73 million coins were worth a measly of $1.66 altogether. As of several weeks ago, the team behind LGB was still undergoing their acolytes to remain patient and loyal. Tweeting from their stated location, America, they offered up a "Don't Panic" meme, accompanied by some W's counsel. Sometimes you just need to have faith and hold on for dear life. GOP Senate candidate to run Let's Go Brandon Super Bowl ad. A candidate for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania intends to air a Let's Go Brandon advertisement during the Super Bowl on Sunday. The ad from Republican candidate David McCormick features audio of a crowd chanting Let's Go Brandon, which emerged last year as an anti-Biden chant. As Insider previously reported, the Let's Go Brandon chant is a euphemism for Joe Biden. It emerged after a NASCAR race in October last year. The ad is expected to air in the Pittsburgh area of NBC platforms. In the ad, McCormick, a former hedge fund CEO, highlights issues many Republicans have touted as President Joe Biden's failures, including inflation, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the border crisis. Biden's approval rating has plunged during his first year in office. The 30-second ad likely came at a hefty price. This year, multiple companies paid $7 million for a Super Bowl commercial slot. Szymanski, McCormick's spokesperson, told Insider that the ad was part of McCormick's 6-figure weekly statewide ad buys. What do you think about Let's Go Brandon? Let us know in the comment section. This brings us to...
Okay, let me read to you about this coin. The Let's Go Brandon, or LGB, or LGB coin meme, was a short-lived 2021 cryptocurrency launched on the Ethereum blockchain that tried to capitalize on the viral anti-Biden chant, which originated from a NASCAR race crowd in October 2021. It became one of the more infamous early parallel economy crypto flops in conservative circles, with allegations of a classic pump and dump scheme or rug pull in crypto slang. The coin launched around early November 2021 under the domain lgbcoin.io, also referred to as LGB coin or Let's Go Brandon token. Creators and key executives, including CEO and Republican influencer Jeffrey Carter, Nick Norden, Alex Mascotti, and associated entities like Island Liquidity LLC. It was heavily marketed as a fun, patriotic America's coin tied to the Let's Go Brandon slogan, a euphemism for F. Joe Biden. Promoters emphasize themes like the American dream, anti-woke values, and potential NASCAR ties. A major selling point was a supposed sponsorship deal with NASCAR driver Brandon Brown, the original Let's Go Brandon figure, and his team, Brandon Built Motorsports. They teased it as a full season primary sponsor for the 2002 Xfinity Series with claims of NASCAR approval. The token pumped dramatically. It rose over 500% at one point, briefly reaching a market cap of around $570 million in early January 2022. Candace Owens was one of the high-profile promoters. On November 24th, 2021, she tweeted, "Finally into crypto and all in on this Let's Go Brandon coin because hashtag Let's Go Brandon." Her post generated significant attention. Trading volume spiked over 425% the day after. The price rose notably in the lead up. Other conservative figures also promoted it, like Ryan Fournier of Students for Trump, Republican Madison Cawthorn, and podcaster David J. Harris Jr. The lawsuit alleged, because they were on a class action lawsuit that included Candace Owens. The lawsuit alleged these endorsements helped create artificial hype while insiders allegedly controlled large token supplies and sold at peaks. So what happens is they don't tell the consumer that they all own like the majority of the coin. So when the consumers all like buy in, the price rises and rises and rises. All the people holding the coins then dump all their coins on the market, and then the coin's basically dead because all the coins have been dumped. The price goes down to like pennies and it's done. And they just do it on purpose. It's a purposeful thing where they create a coin, bring in a bunch of money off of it, and then they dump it on the market, and then they take all the money. The coin's website and promoters assured investors the rug won't be pulled and framed it as more than a joke, a serious investment opportunity with real-world ties to NASCAR, conservative causes, even claimed donations to groups like Turning Point USA. I wonder who came up with that idea. The crash and the rug pull allegations. On December 30th, 2021, the sponsorship with Brandon Brown was announced publicly, causing another price surge. Almost immediately, NASCAR distanced itself. Executives had reportedly told the coin team as early as November 5th, 2021, that they would not allow Let's Go Brandon branding on the car. They might have considered the abbreviation LGBcoin.io, but the full phrase was a no-go. NASCAR publicly rejected the deal on January 4, 2022. The price crashed hard, down 63% in days, eventually to near zero by late January 2022. Trading volume dried up, and the token became essentially worthless. Allegations: insiders, executives, and early holders allegedly sold off mass amounts of tokens at inflated prices. One hub wallet alone cashed out over $1.5 million worth. Promoters were accused of using patriotic messaging to lure retail investors, mostly conservative supporters, while hiding ownership/control and the Shake NASCAR deal. April 22nd onward is the lawsuit. Missouri investor Eric DeFord filed a class action lawsuit in Florida federal court on behalf of investors who bought during the relevant period, roughly November 21 through March 22nd. Defendants included the company LGB Coin, executives Kotulas and Carter, Brandon Brown, Brandon Built Motorsports, NASCAR, and promoters like Candace Owens, David J. Harris Jr., and others. The core claims are a pump and dump scheme, misleading statements about NASCAR sponsorship, false endorsements, and deceptive trade practices. The suit argued promoters helped inflate the price so insiders could exit profitably, leaving buyers with worthless tokens. It was a 77-page complaint, later amended, detailing wallet transactions, promotional timelines, and how hype drove the bubble. The case dragged on with motions to dismiss. Some parts were narrowed. NASCAR fought hard to be removed. Owens was named a promoter defendant for her social media activity, but was not accused of being an insider or receiving tokens as payment, unlike some others. No major personal judgment against her has been widely reported as a final outcome. Representative Madison Cawthorn faced House Ethic Committee sanctions for his promotion and had to pay fines and donate proceeds. The SEC also investigated aspects, subpoenas for communications with promoters like Owens. The coin never recovered, and it became a cautionary tale of meme coin hype in political circles. The episode happened right in the middle of Owens's parallel economy push, around the same time she was heavily promoting Glorify, Freedom Phone, and Parler under George Farmer. It fits this broader pattern that was going on in 2021 of conservative figures trying to build alternatives to big tech and big finance that often involved high-risk crypto ventures. Once again, she's involved in something that's sort of a scam, and I guarantee you she made money off of it. She wasn't making a tweet for no reason. So she was either paid for that tweet or she had coins that they, had on hold for her. And then she didn't have to do the transactions, they did it for her. They made money off the Freedom Phone, which was a scam. They made money off of this, which was a scam, most likely, allegedly, just asking questions. And then the Glorify thing. That's like 3 things that we know of so far. So it's pretty interesting and weird, And really, it's just like a pattern of taking advantage of people who have political leanings. So you get them all fired up about something, and then you use that emotion to drive product that are useless so that they pour money into them. Or you latch onto things so you can latch onto the donors who are also probably getting tax write-offs and all kinds of other stuff. So it's like a circle of just, you know what I'm saying?
Is so that you see how each person fits in the puzzle. Raheem is not just a random person. He is a respected journalist and former aide to Nigel Farage. And he went public with allegations of sexual assault against George Farmer in late 2022, saying that George Farmer had made unwanted physical advances, including groping, kissing during a social encounter.
One of the biggest rumors on X amongst the conservatives is that Candace Owens and George Farmer have a sham marriage that was forged for
Okay, so we know about this because we learned about it last time, but I just wanted to remind you because we've been talking about Nigel Farage, and that guy was connected very heavily to Nigel Farage.
For that of George Farmer, yes, we have someone who has come forward to complain that, okay, George did this to me. And we also had Milo Neapolis, who is constantly outing people. You can't trust Milo's words for anything. But he also had mentioned some time ago that Candace Owens' husband is gay. Yeah. So we don't know. Now she is cool with Milo, so we don't know how his stance are on him regarding his sexuality. Lord, these people. Let's move forward. Also in 2022, do you remember who was one of the most Googled guys in the world, besides Amber Heard and her husband man who were causing chaos? Yes, Andrew Tate became one of the most Googled men on earth in 2022. George Farmer had practiced and learned the ropes, and he was already in phase pundit activation. In September 2023, Farmer is appointed to the board of directors of JB News, All Perspectives Limited, the channel where Nigel Farage hosts his primary show. This completes the loop. Farmer is now Farage's boss and benefactor, and Farmer sponsors Farage. Farage goes out there and makes it big time. Now, we cannot go as far as saying that George Farmer is the main creator of Nigel, because Nigel has been a pundit long before.
So it's kind of weird that Nigel Farage has kind of changed his tune, and then Candace Owens has as well. Like, they're having to change whatever their plan is because it wasn't working how it was going. Like, they made it so far, now they have to have a different tactic, maybe. That's just me thinking, because I do have a conspiratorial mind. But I just find it kind of odd that these people who are all sort of connected in weird ways, including Tucker and stuff, had one thing they were pushing, and it's almost like they pushed it as far as they could, and now they have to have a different message to get whatever the goal is to keep going.
For when George Farmer was still a baby, thinking about his teenage years. But there is something about Nigel Farage and George Farmer's coalition from the time they collided that changed something. And George Farmer practiced something with Nigel Farage, which he now took and implemented first, in my opinion, on Andrew Tate. And second, who was Mrs. Worldwide in 2025?
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please, because today is obviously a day of celebration. Yes, in case you missed it, we officially have become the #1 podcast in the world. Not in America, okay, not in Europe. I am talking about in the world. and the haters stay mad.
Haters. Candace Owens worked, like we've already said, she was working with Turning Point UK when they went to the UK and met her husband. Shortly after they came back from the UK, she was fired from Turning Point USA. She went to work with PragerU. She worked with PragerU, where she interviewed also Nigel Farage, her husband, Charlie Kirk. After that, after a while, they parted ways. Then Candace Owens started working with the Daily Wire. She worked with the Daily Wire for some time too. In 2024, Candace Owens converted.
We're gonna pause this video here and probably pick it up next series, but let's go read a little bit of our House and Habit series before we wrap this video up. Okay, so remember where we were, but she didn't want to talk to me, she wanted to talk about me, was where we left off. The effect was instant, a viral storm across the entire digital expanse. Women around the country started to chime in, offering commentary on our spat with a passion usually reserved for major sports showdowns or loaded Bravo reunions. Over the next 10 days, Candace continued to capitalize on the drama. She tied me to neoconservatives, mocked my writing and readership as a sign of cultural decay, cast me as a compromised mouthpiece for the elite, cited my designer loafers as proof of gross vapidity. Okay, she doesn't need to be talking about nobody's loafers. Have you seen the loafers her and Andrew Tate wear? Okay. Like, she needs to not be saying anything about other people's loafers, all right? And unfairly dragged in Olivia, who had done nothing besides show up to a dinner date and intervene to prevent unfair coverage of her. Candace seized on the phrase clean shot. It was dramatic enough to insinuate sinister intentions underway. Throughout her hour-long program, she spoke about it repeatedly, emphasizing the shot, clean shot, take a clean shot, shot. And she told her audience that Olivia had ordered a hit piece on her, emphasizing the hit piece, ordered a hit piece, clean, shot, hit, piece, hit, shot, piece, shot, hit, clean, hit. She referred to the rules of the jungle and accused the two of us as hunting her. What Olivia and I were planning, she said, was to take her out.
How a viral attack can consume you while you're still processing private heartbreak. I mean, she's so full of it. In this case, it's often easier to surrender to the noise than to defend yourself, because defending yourself means revealing private details that the internet does not deserve. But that would shift the story entirely. There are major parts of this situation missing from the public view. Key elements are being manipulated to fit convenient narratives, and it's all very sad to watch. I trust that you as readers know that the unspoken details are excluded for fair reason, marked by an unfortunate disconnect. In this chaos, I've chosen to step back and away and let people draw conclusions from a limited perspective. They can trash me all they want moving forward. I can only control how I respond. And no, it's not easy. Okay, Jessica Reed Krause, I believe none of that. Okay, you are not a victim here. That should have read is, I am a total piece of crap who got caught being a piece of crap. And I apologize to my readers who believe that anything that I've ever done has ever been authentic, when really I was off to the highest bidder as soon as that bid was made available to me.
Candace also told her viewers where her would-be character assassin was stationed. Olivia had moved to Malibu. Prior to Candace's disclosure, nobody knew where Olivia lived. Only a few close friends, including Mitchell. Almost no one had her address. She had been hiding for months. Now, millions of people knew that she could be located in a tiny beach town. Millions who also legitimately believed she was masterminding a clean shot to take out Candace Owens, which made some of those people want to retaliate. Even more explosive, Candace added that there might be a more powerful shadow force orchestrating the conspiracy against her. She suggested that Olivia was a honeypot who had ensnared RFK, and that I was controlling RFK through the blackmail Olivia had secured, all on behalf of Israel. That, Candace said, was why Olivia and I both wanted to protect RFK, implying he was some kind of asset inside the U.S. government. Candace. Olivia, currently living in Malibu, which means now she has fled the city, which means now she has got to drive a car, is driving a car. She's driving a foreign car in Malibu. Her license plates, I'm not going to give you the end of the license plate, but her real true license plates are, I'm going to show you here, RFK 66 blank blank. That is some coincidence. I gotta tell you, it's not every day that your license plates reflect the sexting scandal you just had, okay? It's not every day. Who purchased this foreign car? Who got this car to Malibu? It's a British car. Your license plates are RFK and some numbers. What the hell is going on, okay? Candace said she didn't censor the license plate to protect Olivia's safety, but to protect herself from censorship. If she included the entire license plate, she might face accusations of doxing, which could get her video removed from YouTube over a violation of their terms. And by the way, YouTube rules, I should be able to show you the entire thing without being accused of doxing. I don't want to take any risk of this video being taken down, she said. But she gave them enough, like what British cars are driving around in Malibu, right? So she just is doxing this woman and she's weaponizing her audience to go attack them. And like I said, this isn't the first time she's done this. She's actually done this over and over and over again since the very end of her career at PragerU, when she started attacking Kim Klacik, all the way up to now. Anybody that stands in her way, or anybody that challenges her, or anybody that upsets her in any way, she tries to completely destroy their life, and she weaponizes her audience against them. And we're going to talk about in the future episode why that's able to happen psychologically, but this video is getting long, so we're going to keep going and then wrap it up soon.
But the other element of this is super interesting. Olivia, currently living in Malibu, which means now she doesn't live in a city, which means now she's got to drive a car, is driving a car. She's driving a foreign car in Malibu, and her license plates, and I'm not giving you the end of the license plates, but her real true license plates are, and I can show you here, RFK 66 blank blank. Okay, they definitely know I'm coming, because you know what, Olivia Nuzzy? You didn't take a clean effing shot. Your shot was not clean enough. It doesn't seem like you understand rules of the jungle. You were hunting someone and you didn't have the shot. And now I'm coming for you 100%, because I find this whole thing now to reek, to positively reek. I am wondering who you are and who pays you to go after certain people, and why it is that Miss Jessica Reed Krause is bragging about her access to Trump and how much access she has now that we know how she operates in the night, which is vile. She's a vile creature, reading messages about someone who is plotting against you, talking about how it needs to be a clean shot, knowing that they are manufacturing lies, makes you a sick and disturbed individual.
Candace continued, we need to look further into what the hell is going on here. And they know I'm coming. They definitely know I'm coming, because you know what, Olivia Nuzzy? You didn't take a clean effing shot. The shot was not clean enough. It doesn't seem like you understand the rules of the jungle. You were hunting someone and you didn't have the shot. And now I'm coming for you 100%, because I find the whole thing now to reek, to positively reek. And I'm wondering who you are and who pays you to go after certain people, and why it is that Miss Jessica Reed Krause is bragging about her access to Trump and how she operates in the night, which is vile. She is a vile creature. For proof of her theory that Israel may have sent me to send Olivia to fall in love with RFK and lose her job in the resulting sex scandal, Candace cited RFK's support for Israel. RFK had first positioned himself as an anti-establishment and anti-war candidate as a Democratic presidential candidate. Shortly after he defected from his party to run as an independent, the October 7th attack seemed to complicate his anti-war position, and RFK endorsed Israeli military retaliation against Palestine and U.S. funding of Israel's siege, although he had steadfastly refused to support U.S. funding for Ukraine as it sought to defend itself from Russia's aggression, even as his own son traveled to the region to fight alongside Ukrainian soldiers. What did this have to do with Olivia and me? According to Candace, RFK's support for Israel could be explained only by her inference that support for Israel, unpopular among his original supporters, must be the result of private pressure from Israel, and that private pressure, she suggested, must somehow be related to his private parts. As digital mistress, Olivia obviously possessed secrets about RFK that could be wielded to control him, and as a friend to both Olivia and RFK, even after their relationship became a scandal, I likely possess those secrets too. Olivia and I must be professional secret getters and secret wielders. Candace suggested, and Israel or its allied deep state forces had assigned us to control the man with secrets to keep, who now controlled the largest agency in the United States government, which would mean Olivia and I controlled the agency on behalf of Israel, which would mean that our first order of business is allies to the gay community first and shadow cabinet secretaries second. Olivia and I would use our powers to save paupers. Candace's rhetoric about the written word had violent connotations. Her delivery seemed to imply we were not character assassins, but perhaps literal assassins, that we could be, seemed likely to be, connected to intelligence and to the spycraft of a foreign government. Government made our rhetorical violence that much more palpable. Candace was strongly implying, hit women. How else to explain how these two writers had fallen back in after a public falling out, and how I had remained close with RFK through the drama, with no compelling alternative theory to raise with her audience because she did not seek alternative theories? Candace had no choice but to present the theory in which her rabbit hole led to the Holy Land and confirmed her pre-existing biases. It was all so obvious as Candace told the story, another plot like so many others concocted by the Jews. Okay, so I think we're going to end it there with that article. Now, Candace knows what she's doing. She knows how to spin these stories, and she's very upset with these two women, right? So you follow the story. A writer got upset with the owner of House and Habit because she wouldn't publish her article that was defaming Candace. And she told her that Olivia read it and she said it wasn't good, and like told her stuff that Olivia had said to her. If you're going to take a shot, it needs to be a clean shot, rhetorically, metaphorically. And Candace Owens has taken that and turned it and twisted it into this crazy conspiracy that's going to get even crazier because she did this for days and days and days. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, the conspiratorial mind. This is the conspiratorial mind given the biggest platform worldwide to twist and shape things the way that you want them to be. When someone hurts you, when someone upsets you, when someone comes against you, you have the power to shape the narrative and control the narrative and manipulate it. But you have this conspiratorial mind, and we've seen it throughout the series, going all the way back to the beginning when she thought Zoe Quinn and Randy Harper, she thought they were after her. She thought they were plotting against her, this giant plot to take her company down because they were afraid she was going to find out who they really are and all this stuff, right? With her doxing company. And so she made up an entire thing out of thin air all about that situation that was nowhere near true. All the way back then, she did it. And she keeps doing it now. And these are real people's lives. And she knows how dangerous it is. And I'm going to show you how I know that she knows in this very short clip, and then we will wrap it up. So let me pull that up. Okay, so in this clip, Candace is going to explain in her own words just how dangerous the internet can be and how weaponizing your audience against people you don't like or that you're having a feud with probably isn't the best or smartest thing, and that it can be extremely dangerous. And she knows this firsthand, allegedly, if the story is true.
About 2 years ago, right before my son was born, while I was pregnant, I had a young man who went by two names. He was schizophrenic, who began sending me documents of his Psych 5150 hold, basically his discharge documents from the hospital. And he would write about 40 emails a day saying to me, you know, like I know, Candace, that I was in the hospital because you somehow convinced them that we weren't in a relationship. You know that we're in a relationship. You put me there. How could you possibly do this to me? You know what we have. Just truly believed that he and I had some sort of relationship and that he was in the hospital because I was lying to his doctors about the relationship that we had. So that obviously instantly flagged me. This, I'm dealing with an actual crazy person. The emails became more and more aggressive. I gave birth to my child. He basically wrote to me and said, I forgive you for, you know, accidentally becoming pregnant with another man, and that we're going to raise this child together and everything's going to be fine. And his personality would oscillate from extremely angry at me to extremely loving and telling me that he forgave me. And he had convinced himself that every single thing that I wrote publicly and said publicly was directed to him. So I'll give you an example. I could tweet something like, only women can give birth, pertaining clearly to the transgendered agenda. And he would come back and write an email and say, I saw you wrote this. Yes, we're going to be happy and have children. I could tweet something, Trump 2024, and he would somehow see, as if it was like a code between me and him, he would somehow think that it signaled something to him that I had to communicate via code. And it was increasingly bizarre, increasingly scary. And things really culminated when this was right when I moved to Tennessee. He began sending me emails. Again, he had two names. He had his real name and then a pseudonym. And he sent me emails of a link to Eminem's song, which you guys remember, Stan. He did that song with Dido. And the song is about a crazed fan who convinces himself that he is receiving hate because he never gets an answer from this person he's obsessed with. And then he ends up killing his wife and his child. And he sent me a link to that. And he said, this is going to be our ending. That was terrifying. Again, we had the cops involved, but the cops kept saying to me, well, there's nothing that we can do until he does something. Think about that. There's nothing that we can do until he actually physically hurts you. So him sending you the song and threatening to hurt you doesn't mean anything. Things culminated when, after moving to Tennessee, he sent me a photo of him with a gun on his lap and said that he was coming to me. And it turned out that he had escaped his mental facility, which was holding him. Now, my understanding of the laws.
Okay, so there you have it. She knows that people are kind of crazy and that you never know who's watching you, or even they could be a good person, but then they're just not going through a very good time in their life, and all kinds of crazy things happen. And so she knows how crazy people can be on the internet, but yet she is using people's real lives, twisting real stories inside those lives in her conspiratorial brain, and then putting that out into an audience that she herself says is one of the biggest worldwide. So we're going to end it there for today. This was part 5 of the series we're doing on Candace Owens here on The Eclectic Journalist. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Episodes drop on Fridays. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And all the links will be in the description for everything used in this video, as always. Thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you next time on The Eclectic Journalist.